I'm a senior activity coordinator. I will always be one, even if I'm not actively working as one. If I lost my job tomorrow and had to work at McDonald's, I'd still be a senior activity coordinator. This was my calling, it was my purpose. It was what I was meant to do. I've kind of known that for a while, but what I found out even more recently, I found an even greater purpose in reaching a particular individual who would have seemed impossible under any other circumstances than my working with her. And I don't know what you believe as far as fate, chance, whatever abstract guiding forces teaches on, you know. I'm not going to say what I do either, but whether I do, but I learned, you know, through trial and error where I'm meant to be, and I wound up in this position, kind of unlikely to do so. I came from a Jewish suburb, east side of Cleveland, Jewish family, and I don't know if this is considered a stereotype by some or a generalization, but it's all around me. It's what I saw, that I was kind of like very strongly encouraged, me and all my friends, strongly encouraged to make as much as we can out of our life, which is a very good thing, of course, but what turned me away is the encouragement and the drive seemed to be so monetarily based, and that's just not me. I always knew I'd have a very inexpensive lifestyle. For one, I don't mind living in a studio apartment. I know where everything is. I don't like to travel much. I never, for some reason, I mean, call me a freak of nature, but I've never had any desire to be a father. I just don't think that was meant to be. And no, it's not because I'm gay. I am gay, but that has nothing to do with it. I just don't see myself as the parental type. And I just have I never had the desire. And so, but I wanted, but I think everybody is nurturing. Everybody has their nurturing instincts. And I felt mine were strong, and that's just it. I just wanted to apply them to my career, and I wanted that to help make a career a job something that I could find rewarding, that I can look forward to going to work on a daily basis. That meant way more to me than taking home a bigger paycheck. And so I was visiting my aunt on a regular basis when I was at a nursing home when I was in high school, and both my mother and my grandmother both separately said to me something about how you should consider going into that, and the seed was planted. And knowing I wanted to go into a helping profession, I suddenly began to realize that working with seniors was absolutely a perfect fit, mainly because I happen to have the same taste in music as most people of that age. Yeah, my record collection, man, I love the Sinatra, Mills Brothers, big band. I have a passion for that stuff. Johnny Mercer's my favorite songwriter of all time. And so I was in Cleveland, Ohio. I went to Kent State University, and that's where you go when you live in Cleveland if you want to sort of go away to college, but be real close to home. It's one town over. And in the gerontology major there, I once again noticed the administrators, same push, same drive to, the staff, the faculty was encouraging people to go for an administrator training program, which is a more lucrative position, and I considered it. It was my sophomore level internship where I knew I was an activity coordinator. And so finished college at 30, and I'm talking BA, I took my time. And now, where all my friends were anxious to leave town when they turned 18 and graduated high school, I didn't quite then, but at 30 I was ready. So I moved to Rochester, New York for a couple years because I had a place to stay. When I didn't quite get the kind of job I had hoped for, I started sending resumes around the country to any town where I knew at least one person. Had a friend here in Austin. She's here tonight. Hi, Marianne. And Marianne Price. And so she helped me get my name out. I found a home that had just opened in a renovated house. By the way, renovated house makes a big difference. It's a home-like environment, not an institutionalized setting. And they were willing to put me up for a trial run. They actually gave me a place to stay for 3 months while they were trying me on the job. I would say it worked out. I've now been there for over 17 years. And when I first came there, I felt the sense of identification with the residents for my being relocated. And even though it may have been against their will, they too were in a different environment now, and that allowed me to grow with the job. And also between that and working what I've gotten from my home life, from my parents, I feel like a lot of my parents is in me when I'm working. People say I look just like my mother, and sometimes I do something and I feel like it's my mother doing it, like anything that's very nurturing one-on-one with residents. With my father, his sense of humor and his ability to work song lyrics into conversation, we have a ball with that. And after a few years, the resident I mentioned earlier moved in. Her name was Marilynn. When she first arrived, Marilynn first arrived, it was, oh boy, gosh, our work is cut out for us. Very, very bitter woman, very quiet, very withdrawn. And when you try to approach her, she'd grit her teeth, she'd try to scratch it, kick you. She'd say, get away from me, get away from me. But somehow I looked in her eyes and I just felt something. I felt a connection, what John Sebastian would call a magical connection. And we were, and I knew that there was something there. And I mentioned earlier my passion for song standards. My other passion, as you all heard earlier, is movies. I probably see more than 3 times as many as most people my age. One that had the most impact on me, that really applied when I first faced the Maryland situation, was Blackboard Jungle. All right, I'm sure some of you have seen it, those who have not. Glenn Ford plays a teacher in a tough inner-city boys' school. And the scene I'm referring to has to do with, he has a friend who works in a fancy prep school, and the friend invites him to visit. While he's there, he tells him he has a job for him. And I remember watching it the first time, I'm like, oh, his troubles are over. His life is going to be paradise from here on in. He can leave that dive behind. But the way he said it, he's like, I can't do that. I can't just give it up. I can't just pass it on to someone else. That's what it took to reach me, to tell me that when there's something, a challenge to face, you got to face it head on. And so I was like, I am going to face this situation head on. I don't want to give up on Marilynn, especially because we had made that connection and I knew there was something there. So I told all the staff I was going to pretend she was the most important person in my life, and that I was really attached to her. And whenever she'd start to give us any trouble, I'd go in the other direction, bomb her with love and affection, kill her with kindness, as they say. First, early on, we started with feeding. My first task with her was involved feeding her. She needed some assistance. She was a little independent when it came to eating. And I can understand how a resident may find being fed a little denigrating at first. But if you get over that hump, I found in the past that feeding a resident can be a very intimate and bonding experience. And I really started to feel myself growing close to her as I was raising a spoon, again, feeling my mother within me and me as a child sitting across from me. And we began to make small talk. And then she said a comment that may be taken as an anti-Semitic comment, but I don't know. I choose to see it as a clever sign of intelligence and a sign of really taking real personal, but the bond between us growing. What happened was I was talking about hanging pictures on a wall to another staff member, and I was talking about how you can use a nail or you can use one of those hooks. The hooks work better. I said, but I don't have a hook now. And she goes, yes, you do. Don't you Jews all have hook noses? Oh. And I'm like, no, believe me, listen, when I was in Rochester, New York, I got a vicious, nasty, anti-Semitic comment. This one pales by comparison. But the yes, it made me curious about her. So I talked to her daughter about it, and her daughter, she jokes and she talks, and she's Archie Bunker level bigotry, not vicious or nasty anti-Semitic. Even once married to a Jewish man, okay. So but I thought of that, how that was sort of to make such a joke might have seemed taboo at one point. So maybe that would be the way to reach her. And at one point, soon thereafter, she wasn't eating so much, and I, in order to encourage her, I just came up with this last minute. I said, come on, Marilynn, just open up for the big fat faggot who's trying to feed you. And I'm like, why not? That may sound like low self-esteem or something. No, I think it's destigmatization. It's calling it what it is. And she laughed. The thing is, she laughed hysterically. So unlike a comedian who has to come up with new material all the time, you're able, in my position, to recycle the same jokes. So I always did it. And she loved it. So I thought, okay, find some more bits that she's going to find funny. And one of them, a previous resident, had always called me Rex for some reason. And I said to that resident, I said, well, if you're going to call me by my name, you got to call me my full name, Rex Harrison. And that resident had passed on, but I decided in her memory to carry the joke on. So I started calling myself Marilynn. I calling myself Rex Harrison to Marilynn. Boy, was that Freudian. Okay. I started calling myself Rex Harrison. I'd say, Rex Harrison is here, Marilynn. Hi, it's Rex. I remember when Marianne and I were out of town one time, and I called her up, and I had the staff member say, Rex Harrison's on the phone. I can hear her laughing from there, and you should have seen Marianne laughing. And so I had that bit, and then what other bit? Oh, you know how when you hold your forehead up to someone, you look them right in the eye, it looks like they got one big eye? And I would do that to her, and I'd say, Cyclops! And she just laughed hysterically at that. Okay, so let's go with that. Then again, I always seem to be having a field day. I seem to be reaching her. Her rough days between my applying techniques I'd learned before and techniques I'd come up with and trial and error, our relationship was definitely starting to grow. And her rough days, where it was more like when she first moved in, it was like all the time. Now it was like about half the time. But I knew it seemed like I was kind of cheating her by always going for the funny bone. And there was a time to be serious. So just tried it one day. I said, Marilynn, will you be my best friend? And she nodded yes. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to recycle that one. And then as I did so, the more I do it, it was more than just a nod. It was kind of a smile and a most endearing sigh. Most endearing sigh was like, yes. And then our relationship started to grow further. And then when I said it was about a 50-50, it was more like her rough times were about once every 3 days or so. And one day, that song that was playing when I came up with Time on My Hands, recorded by a great singer of the 30s named Lee Wiley. And that recording was playing on the radio. One day, I look over to Marilynn and I see her lips moving slightly, and I'm like, because she had never responded to that kind of stimuli before. Then I suddenly realized, yes, she was lip syncing the lyrics, and I felt that she was being taken to another time in her life, maybe a more peaceful one. And I talked again to her daughter, and her daughter told me I wanted to find out about her past. I found out. Whether she's bitter. When she was 3 years old, her parents divorced. They sent her to a Catholic orphanage, even though she wasn't Catholic. And in her later years, she would speak of that with great horror. She was bounced around from parent to grandparent. One time living with her father and stepmother, comes home from school one day and they're gone. They just abandoned her. And as an adult, she had married 3 times, widowed each time. First time at 35. And her daughter said, yes, for a long time she has been kind of aloof, kind of narcissistic, kind of arrogant. No matter what she was. And her dementia might have made her more like that at times. No matter what, she was still human. You know, we refer to her as she, we don't refer to her as it. And she deserved, not only did I think she deserved respect, but I knew I had to cut her some major slack. One point, my mother was in the hospital for about 7 months. And during that time, a doctor once told me that she had about a 50% chance of surviving. And I tried not to talk about this to residents too much. It's just not very professional in my field. But I did talk to staff. I needed to talk to somebody. I was really uptight about it. And I says to someone, even though I'm 42 at the time, I can't imagine going through the rest of my life without a mother. Marilynn looks up and she goes, you won't have to. I'll adopt you. I know. By the way, now my mother's fine. That was 8 years ago, and she did survive. She's making just fine. Okay, and now my relationship with Marilynn was really, really solid. And that's right, 50. Okay, and so when I mentioned earlier that I have never had any desire to have children, one thing, even though I see people with kids and I don't feel envy for them like you're supposed to by nature, I just never did. One thing I always was jealous, though, of people in general when they talk about their kids. Those of you who have kids know this, of course, and those who don't have heard this. Everyone in general says, there's nothing like the day my baby was born. It's always talked about. I was kind of envious, even though that day wouldn't have been a very good one. For me, personally, I did want a day that was going to mean that much to me. You may think this pales by comparison. It may not seem like much. But I'm walking down the hall one night. Oh, by the way, this brings to mind a couple of song lyrics, 2 different genres. One song that Nat King Cole recorded in his later years, a favorite of Natalie's, I hear, called That Sunday, That Summer. Even though I believe this was a Thursday and it was in winter, the opening line of the song is, if I had to choose just one day to live within my heart. Well, I always hear that song when I relive this moment in my mind, which I do about on a daily basis, which I have all these years. I'm walking down the hall, I see her lying in her bed, the light shone from the hallway into there, and I just gently tiptoe up to her, I brushed a little hair off and I kissed her on the forehead, and I tiptoed out. Something prompted me to turn around, and when I did, I couldn't believe what I saw. She had been asleep, but her eyes were still closed, but she had a smile that could light up Times Square. And it's just been a natural reflexive response. But no matter what anyone says, I felt this and I believe it and I saw it. And this brings to mind another song of a different genre, the words of Earth, Wind, and Fire, the song That's the Way of the World. You know the chorus, plant a flower, grow a pearl, a child is born with a heart of gold, ways of the world makes the heart grow cold. Well, I saw it and I felt it. I believe it. The child within Marilynn, long corrupted by the world since she was about 3 years old, was able to return at the very end of her life. From there on in, the rough days were few and far between, once in a blue moon. Now I'm suddenly realizing I had pretended to be attached to her, now I really was. And how am I going to take it when her time comes? Well, I hate to say it was an advantage, but a nurse did tell me, the nurse told me that her signs were showing that she didn't have long. So I had about 2 weeks to say goodbye to her, made the most of it, and I felt very good about it. I felt I did it in a healthy way. I remember the last time I saw her, she was just sitting at the table, very quiet, pretty non-responsive. I just said goodnight to her. I told her it was a Thursday and I'm off Friday, so I said, I'll see you Saturday. And I can tell that she felt my presence and that she felt my love, even though she wasn't responding, and that the child within that had returned was there, was still very apparent, because it was all along ever since that moment I mentioned earlier. Now, I mentioned that I don't care what you believe. To each his own. Do you believe in angels? I don't know. I won't say whether I do or not. But I do feel Marilynn's presence around me. I feel the memory of her is very strong. I didn't want to, when I was mourning her and I was sad at first, a lot of people would say what you say, you'll get over it. I don't want to get over it. But when I mourn her, I feel close to her. I may be mourning her the rest of my life. That's okay, and it's not stifling or anything. And likewise with angels, whether or not you believe in heaven or an afterlife or what have you. I won't say whether I do or not, but I will say this, if I don't, I could be hypothetical. And so either speaking hypothetically or saying when I go to heaven. Whichever it is, when or if I go to heaven, the first person I'm going to want to see is going to be Marilynn.